So what we want to look at today is some GitHub Actions. We've done a fair amount of that already in the Tauri ecosystem. But the thing that we are looking at working with right now, and Lorenzo is in chat and has been doing a bunch with the docs, so definitely appreciate your help here. But one thing that we're running into is we've got separate repos. Whoop whoop. We have separate repos because Tauri docs is going to be getting commits from Crowdin or whatever translation service we end up using, and we're getting translations and versions. Every time we mark a new version, it's basically copying all that content. And we also have plugins, which you might end up pulling into the docs repo too. So like there's a lot of commit noise that didn't feel necessary to have in the main repo. And if we're having to pull in stuff from outside repos anyways, because of plugins and whatnot, Tauri docs made sense. It's more like a view layer, I guess, which could kind of be abstracted out into a separate repo. Benefits, downsides, but that's what we have right now. And one of the things that we have in our workflows is to, from the main repo, trigger an update. So we've got this update docs. And interesting, it's on release right now. I don't know that that's... I think that might be triggered. So the when you run a GitHub action, you get a GitHub token. It has a special scope of permissions so as not to trigger other workflows. And that is the default, so you don't get into this situation where you could have an infinite loop in your CI/CD. You don't want one workflow to trigger another workflow, and then that other workflow go back and trigger your first workflow, or some sort of cyclical thing. So like that's the default. You can work around it by creating a personal access token. Got hair flying right in front of me. A personal access token, and then it acts similar to a user, but you have to be a little bit more careful. And that's fine. It's just something to keep in mind. But one of the things that a bot could do is create a release. And if the bot creates the release, depending on what token you use, it might not actually trigger this. So something to keep in mind. Workflow dispatch is a button. So we have a button here to make it easier to trigger an update of the docs. If we go into actions, do they really hide the bar on the left? Select workflow. Yes, they do. Okay. Button. Run workflow. So that's probably something that we're going to still want to keep because that's handy. And then we've got the update docs workflow. We've got a couple actions and steps that we do in here, and most of that's probably going to come over. We'll use melee search for our search, and that powers both the website and the bot. And we need to feed it our documentation in an expected format so it can index that and provide search on it. So every time we have a new release, we basically give it the updated docs. We do some things with versions because we want to write down the versions. This is used to query on the release notes page, I believe. .env. Looks like we're setting up stuff for the bot, I think. Correct, for release notes. Okay, that's what I thought. So we're just reading it right out of a text file, or do we actually pull that in somewhere else? Not that that is necessarily bad. It's just interesting, I guess. Side note, in general, we probably don't rely on the master branch. So for those unfamiliar with GitHub Actions, we've got a couple of types of syntax. Name is more of a label. It's a visibility thing. And then we effectively have two ways to run commands. We can either use run, and it's sort of like running just right on the command line. And we've got uses, and that is targeting a repo at a tag. Well, I shouldn't say tag. I should say a ref. And a ref could be a branch, or it could be a git tag, or it could be a commit SHA. Obviously, there's reasons to use each. Git tag provides the most flexibility, but is not 100% secure because somebody could change that git tag, what that git tag points at. But relying on the master branch or the main branch, as I would prefer to call it, that is probably not the safest thing to do. The alternative here would probably, if they don't have git tags and they don't have a publishing scheme for their git tags, I'd probably say rely on git SHA, because it's not going to accidentally break out from under us. And then we open up that pull request, and this is using, we have a forked version of create pull request right now, which is something that Peter Evans did, I think. And at Lorenzo, you're saying that we want to do some refactors on the release notes, so we'll probably just pull that over for right now. And then if it's all in one spot, I think it'll be easier for that to help you with that refactor. Okay, so let's make sure we don't have anything else. Okay. It's not the easiest to abstract things in GitHub Actions. It's gotten easier because now they have composite actions, and those come with pros and cons too. But what we had done previously, I believe, is have this workflow, but we also have it contained in our publishing sequence. And we literally have to copy and paste it, which is sort of unfortunate. We are gating it on if it's actually a release. So we only want to run this publish or update docs when we successfully publish something. Did I spell that wrong? Successful publish. That's funny. So as you can see, it's pretty much the exact same thing. And it works. It's not dry. But it's not the end of the world because we're pretty much doing it only in this one spot. When we're starting to think about pulling docs from other locations, though, like the plugin repos, now that starts to become more complex because now we would have to copy and paste that workflow into everything else too. So what we want to do today, and we had a little bit of a technical difficulties at the beginning, so you have a little bit less time, but I think we still can get it done. Right? Yeah. Spelling mistake. I mean, from the English point of view, not from my syntax point of view. It works. I was consistent. I just consistently spelled it wrong as per the English language. So we want to basically abstract this out. And how we're going to do that, we're not going to use composite actions for this. What we want to do is we want to have kind of a single source of truth. And the thing that cares about it really is the Tauri docs repo. we do have to think about things a little bit because we've got some of our commands are reliant on folder locations. Yeah, that's fair. Hey, Jonas. Are you typing in chat? Oh, yes, I see your message. Perfectly fine. So we need to think about this a little bit. If we want to make this workflow, if we want to move this workflow into Tauri docs and we want to make it work for every repo that's pushing docs, we need to kind of paper over this. I think the first shift is just going to copy this verbatim and we can move from there. But like we're going to have to abstract this out. And I think that's going to be, I think folder locations are going to be the main thing we need to consider. But we have ways to deal with that. Now let's just make sure we don't have it anywhere else. I think for the most part, we just have it in those two locations, update docs and then in our publish workflow. Tests, test. I think so. So what we want to do is abstract these out. And what we can do is there's a handful of ways that we can trigger GitHub Actions. In workflow. Syntax, I think, is the magical words we need to use. So there's different events that we can trigger on. And events that trigger workflows. Here we go. So these are all the events. Can we, first off, have them in the way, but I'll make this just a little bit bigger. So most of these we're probably not going to need to deal with. For the most part, all of my workflows that I make almost always use pull request, push, and you can gate or filter push down to a specific branch. So push onto the main branch. That's probably the main ones. Those pretty much get used everywhere. And then there's workflow dispatch and repository dispatch. Those are the two a little bit newer things that I've been pulling in more places. The workflow dispatch is the one that we had looked at previously. That gives us the button. And they say it's a way to manually trigger a workflow. And we can actually codify things into that button where we get choices. I think they have an example in here, if I recall correctly. Maybe it's on another page. But you get this button and you have ways to give it different, you can specify different options or options in the YAML that put you into different like types of syntax. So text and choice and checkbox are probably the main three I think you'll end up using. So the one way that I just set up in a client project was we have a choice of the different environments. So we can push to staging or a QA instance or whatever, what have you. I think for the most part, the thing that we might think about is a branch, but that could be dynamic. So we'd end up having likely do a text. Although they do have use workflow from. I feel like use workflow from is something new. or newer from when I last looked at the options. But that's one option, and we're gonna likely have that on our workflow. And then the one that we really want to look at is the repository dispatch. And that effectively is setting up a webhook. We can opt into this repository dispatch, and if we essentially trigger a webhook with this event type, this workflow is going to trigger. So we can set up in Tauri docs a workflow using repository dispatch, likely with workflow dispatch and repository dispatch. And now in all of the other repos, anytime we want the docs to update, we say, hey, kick off this workflow. And we just basically push a response to this workflow endpoint with potentially with a payload, and the payload is where we can pass in the variables. So the variable is being likely something to do with paths. So we'll probably have to pass in some variables. So this for the first pass, if we just hard code it, we're probably not going to need any inputs. But they end up being written in the same way as this workflow dispatch. We're saying these are the inputs we're expecting when you trigger this event. We're going to grab the payload and grab these values they give us. And that would actually let us pass and pass. So each workflow that's calling us would be able to say, hey, we are going to have content here, or we're going to have something here. And either our run commands can use that variable, or the other actions that we can have that can use that variable. So like Docusaurus path, which that might not matter as much because we're gonna maybe switch our pathing around a little bit. But I guess we've changed this. This is what I was looking for. Like Rust Docusaurus, that has a bunch of path expectations built into it. So, and all those, we're going to have, like, changes are going to happen, and the repo that has updates is going to know when those paths change. So as those paths change, and we can change it in each workflow. But then Tauri docs also cares about paths for itself. So this will work nice because the other repos can say, hey, this is the path to the thing that I want you to grab. And the Tauri docs repo can say, hey, I need the path. Thank you. Use that. And all the other pathing internally within Tauri docs, that workflow is going to be in the same repo. So we can deal with it all in one spot there. So first of all, I don't think we've got we do not have any workflows. So we're going to copy this over quick. Let's make sure I've got, you were having a think. It'd be possible to use artifacts. Then you only need to reference the artifact name and not a full path. Yeah, so there's artifacts between different repos can be a bit painful. But that's not the worst idea. That is not the worst idea. I think we're kind of dependent on our paths right now. But once we move things over, that wouldn't be the worst thing to change. That could be something that we could do. Because so when a GitHub action runs, it can create, obviously it's just sort of running in like a little VPS or a little box, and you have some access to file system things, you can take those artifacts and upload them somewhere. Like you could do normal like pushes to S3 or whatever, and there's GitHub release is also an option. But we can also upload it directly to the workflow. So that workflow could run, create an output, upload that artifact to the workflow, and then pass a URL to our repository dispatch payload. That when update docs runs, it will say, hey, I need to grab this. I need to grab these artifacts. I think that gets a little bit complicated though when you're trying to also have a button on this repo. So we'd have to kind of do a switch. Like if we have artifacts, use them. If not, then we need to generate them. And I think it's interesting too, because like we need some of the things in the main or in each of the plugin and main Tauri repos to do the generation. But we don't need all of the things to do the generation to the final form of our docs. So like it's kind of a weird split. Like the way our Docusaurus is expecting things is to be able to on build generate all these things by itself. But that's when you got a big monorepo, that's kind of a big ask. Yeah, do I hand over finished MD files or the whole CLI.js folder? Yeah. Yeah, and that, I mean, we can either do artifacts or we can just grab it directly from a branch. Literally just download the whole folder and grab it and generate it that way. I think yeah, there's definitely pros and cons on both sides, I think, but if you get too advanced with file pathing, I think that makes all of the local testing and development and running it via button more complex I don't know that the value that we gain from passing files is better than just using the pass. Because the other thing to think about too is we can potentially set up a script or something that does that effectively is mirroring our workflow here. And if we have something mirroring the workflow that we can run locally, as long as you have these folders that it's expecting relative to each other in the same file structure, running it in GitHub Actions or a bash script or what have you locally should give you effectively the same output. So I think that might, the local running and running it via the button, those would probably be my biggest hesitations on moving more towards a artifact and file passing structure. Does that make sense? I grabbed some updates. We've done some things since I grabbed this last. And I think we pretty much just copy and paste this over. So we don't have any workflows yet. I am presuming that this update docs is going to give us the latest. And then as far as secrets. What secrets? So we got the melee search API key, which we'll have to grab. So I might have to just comment that out for the moment, because I think that's going to fail unless we grab that. And I don't know that I'll be able to grab that quickly. The version stuff should be fine. Discord bot secret. So these are setting up M's. And so this is how we're deploying the bot. Now we've been talking about actually switching this to serverless. We could do it via the we've got our site hosted on Netlify already. We could use Netlify functions to run this, and for the most part, we're just using like bot commands, and that would work fine with serverless. And then we would have to worry much less about it actually keeping it running. So then the thing that we only really need to worry about is the melee search. And git config is fine, and then pull request. We'll probably still want this pull request in here. When we trigger it, it's going to show up in this actions menu, and it's not actually going to be attached to anything. It's not like it's attached to a specific commit or what have you. You know, if you open up a PR, you get that information about the that context, the SHA from the PR. We're not going to have that. So we're effectively going to be applying this change over the main branch, and we need to open up a PR with our changes. So like that workflow is all going to be the same. So I think for the most part, we copy and paste this. This will give us a good starting point. We'll probably have to comment a couple things out, at least for the time being. Every GitHub action goes in a .github/workflows folder. We don't have one of those yet. .github/workflows/update docs.yaml. So we've got the, hey Fabian. So we've got the Rust Docusaurus stuff here, and this was being used to generate the Rust docs, but we've kind of removed that just using docrs for the moment, because we lose a lot of the API and syntax kind of information sort of gets lost when passing it through Markdown. And we've been exploring kind of this options with the JavaScript as well, TypeScript, I guess, for the exact same reason. So the what's happening right now is we're just straight up generating it and copying over. So you can see, well, let's get rid of some of this other setup first. We'll need to do the bots. We're not going to focus on that immediately though. So bot secret, bot deployment. We will want to do the doc PR, and we're going to hold off on melee search for the moment. So that way we are focusing strictly on generating our JS docs, generating our TS docs, and then opening up a pull release, or pull request rather. And we already have some splitting up of the workflows here, or splitting up of the repositories into separate folders. And we want to keep that, because if in our action, if we set up our folder structure in the action in the same way as somebody might have it locally, that's going to make reasoning about this much easier. So like if I like my current folder structure is I've got a Tauri apps folder. And I'm going to have Tauri docs and Tauri and all the other plugin repos in that folder. And if I can set up my local folder and my GitHub Action in the same way, and I'm assuming people are going to mostly set it up this way too. That's going to make mirroring these commands locally much easier. So we've got a checkout into the main path. This is going to be pulling from the main branch. So it's going to pull from the default branch right now unless we specify something. And the default is to pull from the repository that it's running on. So this one, for instance, will need to be Tauri, because we have shifted it over, and now the main repo is actually Tauri docs, or the repo that this is running from is Tauri docs. And we're also grabbing the Tauri search bot. Interesting. We may end up moving that over, presuming everybody else is okay with that. But we could put that in like a functions folder if we're switching that to completely serverless. But we're going to leave that out for right now. So this is going to give us a workspace in our GitHub Action run with a folder called Tauri and a folder called Tauri docs, which mirrors basically the folder structure somebody might have locally. We're going to, in our Tauri tooling, we're going to run yarn and then generate, and then copy that over. We're copying it over from Tauri to Tauri docs. This is likely going to be running on the main branch, and this is also going to be running on the main branch. We can, as part of the inputs on the repository dispatch, we can give it a payload that has a ref, so we can pull in a specific branch of Tauri, of the main Tauri repo if we need. I don't think we're going to need to do that right now. I think our default is the next branch, right? There's still some conversation to be had about how we're doing our branch strategy, but I'm presuming that next is probably fine for right now. So we've got the skeleton. Let's make sure that we're PRing in the right spot. Token, update docs. We're going to have a branch of docs release. Our path is going to be in Tauri docs, and that's still the same. That hasn't changed. So we're pulling down two repos, and they're going to each have their own Git, their .git folder. So this is saying, hey, do the thing out of the .git folder that's in the Tauri docs folder. Title, label, body, that's all fine. So we do need to confirm. We're not going to open up the pull request right now, because I want to run it. When I open up the PR, I want to test it in the PR just to be certain. And the way we can do that is we want to say, so sometimes it makes sense to like drop this in here as a permanent logical statement. And sometimes it makes sense to just drop it in here to test. But this wraps around back to what's going to be triggering it. We are currently triggering on release and workflow dispatch. We don't need release anymore. We do still want to keep our button. Hey, Ben Weiss. I think that's how you pronounce it. Feel free to correct me if I am incorrect about that. So right now our input on the great. Yeah, small world. We've been running into each other a bunch recently. So right now we have three inputs on our button: get name, email, and version. I don't remember where we actually use these. So we do inputs dot. So we're using version in our bots. That is something that I think is gonna change, and I just don't want to deal with that right now. Get name and get email, and that's only going to be for the config. Okay, great, we've got defaults, and those defaults should be fine. But we don't have a default on version, which is partly why I'm just nixing it for the moment. So let's remove that. So now when we push this and it gets into the main branch, workflow dispatch, you can only trigger based off of workflows that are on the main branch. So we won't be able to test this button until it actually is merged and on the main branch. But once it's on the main branch, these are our two options. It's going to default to these strings. We can change them, which is very unlikely to happen. There are permissions around who can click these buttons and who can see them, which is something that we can set up via our teams in Tauri. So this would mostly be a button that somebody on the team directly would be clicking. And if they click this, I think the reason we're going to be pressing this button is to test to make sure that this is probably where we want to think about the ref a little bit. But I think when somebody's pressing this button, we want to make it easy for them to test to make sure that all the paths and everything are correct. We're less worried about the actual PR opening, which is why I think it makes sense to actually hard code this if statement directly in here. And before I forget, well, we're only going to need one secret for the moment, which is the bot, BAT. I can grab that, but we're going to be skipping that for the moment when I open up the PR. So the other options that we're going to want to do is pull request for my testing purposes at the moment, and then repository dispatch. And that is going to be getting a payload. I should be able to just copy and paste. I think we call it just update docs right now. And that's going to effectively mirror the name that we have for this workflow file. The reason there's event types is a repository can have multiple workflows, each with their own repository dispatch. And this is a way to filter. Like, I only want this one or two workflow to run in this repository when we get a webhook to this repository. So that's a way to, when specifying the type, I only want to run it when my webhook sends me an event with this type. And here you can see the payload. So, like the payload that it's expecting, we can actually use an action. I think the same person that made this create pull request, we forked it just partly as a security measure, and we've been like updating it with that as they've been making changes. And actually, I should probably really note that here, because that has been working pretty well, and I want to make sure to give them some credit for that. It's Peter Evans. Nope. Create. It's forked. I'm pretty sure I can get to it through here. So let's say soft fork of for security purposes. 312. That's interesting. That must be some patch thing going on there. 3, 4, v3. Are we at 341? 10. Oh, 12. It's Friday. Brain is still catching up. 4 comes before 12. Oh boy. Okay. Sleep is important, y'all. So when we're not doing anything with this specific payload at the moment. So all that's going to happen is when we hit this, we're going to get a workflow created, and we're not doing anything with any of the payload information that it's giving us. We will want to eventually, but for the moment, all we want to do is trigger this. So we've got pull request. And what we can do here is, it's not the end of the world to run a lot of this on PR. And it's kind of nice as we're shifting things around as sort of a check to run this on PR. Because if you run it on PR and we've moved docs around or moved folders around or what have you, this is going to fail, which I think is going to be helpful. So what we can do is just make sure that some of these things, like doing a bot deployment, don't actually run on this. And we could potentially split it up into separate jobs, which might make sense. But for the first step here, we're gonna basically make sure it doesn't run on PR. And pull request. So many of these events also have types too. So you can have it only run on specific items on the pull request or events on the pull request itself. But we want to do, the syntax changes based on the context, which is a little bit frustrating. And I'm hoping to grab a copy and paste because I don't want to deal with that. So here, this is what I was looking for. See, sometimes like if they've got logical stuff in here, you've got to have it in this. If you don't do logical stuff, like what are the other if blocks? Yeah, like this if block doesn't have any of those. So like that's really confusing. And I think the big difference is if it's a step versus if it's on the job, or if it's on the no, I mean this is on the step too. So yeah, I don't know. I always end up just copying it because it changes so much, or the changes based on the context, and like I can't remember that context. So here, we only want to run it on pull request. Or we don't want to run it on pull request. So it would be that. So this should give us, when we open up a PR, hey Elf, when we open up a PR, we want to say, check this stuff out, do the JS doc generation, git config, sure, that's fine. That's going to not matter. But we don't want to open up a PR. And this will only run on pull request. when we then merge this in, we would be able to run this on repository dispatch. So I think this is probably fine for the moment. The other thing that we can do, which I can. Do we split this out? So bot deployment, we're just re-triggering a bot deployment. I don't know that we need to do that every time. And I don't know how the search index is worked into the bot. I don't think we need to, I'm pretty sure we don't need to deploy it every time we have a version update. Because it's just we're gonna be pushing to melee search. Melee search is gonna re-index. I don't think this actually points to a specific version of the index. I think the bot just points to the URL. It does a query just like the website does. So I don't know that we need to do that. And there's actually a bot restart in there too. Interesting. So I'm going to make a note. Do we even, call it to do. Do we even need to do a bot deploy here? Applying version for release notes. This here is, this sets up EMS for the search bot and the search indexing. Oh, here's our indexing. Oh, okay. The bot needs the API key. Or the public key at least. So I'm guessing there's some key pair stuff going on. So we probably can remove the bot stuff. We need the melee search as part of it. So I'm going to just copy this in here so it doesn't accidentally be included. Because we don't want melee search to do its thing on a pull request. This is fine. All it's doing is creating documents. Sending up EMS is fine. And I'm going to put it here, even though I think we're going to end up removing it. So that way, if somebody comes in and if we get enough of this done, I open up a PR and this gets merged in for further iteration. Somebody can't come in here and actually comment it out and start pushing on PR. And I think Lorenzo was saying that we don't actually need to run the WebKit install anymore. Do we need to run this? Question mark. Okay, so I think there's enough here. We'll get a test on PR. We'll have a repository dispatch. We might be able to test that out real quick in a separate repo. So let's spin up a new branch, get checkout. We want to do, what should we call this? Update docs workflow. git commit, shift over, update docs workflow as a skeleton. Forgot 2 stages. Try again. I do sign my commits, so I will get a window to punch in my password because I do not like to have some of this stored, so somebody can't just, not that's really going to happen because it's mostly just me around by the computer and close family, but it's nice not to be certain that nobody's going to commit something unless it's going through me, basically. So I think we can push. This will give us a branch. We can open up a PR. Shifting over the update docs workflow to serve as a single source of truth. The main Tauri repo and any plugin repos or anything requiring documentation really can then trigger this workflow via a webhook. With a specific payload to customize it. We're gonna have to have some context though, and I think that's gonna get more involved with the plugin stuff. But the things that we're doing in the main Tauri repo, I think we can hard code for the moment, or at least some of it. The actual like input folder, we can potentially bring that in the event payload and have a fallback otherwise. So do like a default, and it's going to default to how we're structured right now, basically. But that's going to get interesting for all the plugin repos, because a plugin, like when you generate the docs, you need to generate the docs for everything. So we're going to have that context. If we're clicking a button from the main branch, we need to know the location of all of those docs. And we can set defaults, and we can potentially make these folder paths consistent. So each plugin repo could have a consistent way to structure the repo to where the docs are always going to be in the same spot. But that's definitely going to be something to think about. Where anytime we're running this without passing in context, we need to have that context of what all needs to be pulled in here and generated. So we'll go ahead and open this. This should give us a run. Nobody said you've done a dumb mistake, so I'm going to assume that we've basically got a code review in here, right? Mob coding. For the most part, we're just going to be generating the docs and checking that it actually worked. So this create pull request should no op. And we're going to kind of be, this will help improve the confidence in this workflow, since we're running it on. Wow, that was quick. Okay, so checkout. We're copying it over. We could also in this workflow run the main Docusaurus, like build the thing. So like the same thing that we're running in Nullify itself, just as a double check to make sure we don't get any weird errors or weird pathing stuff. with any docs that come in. But I mean, like at the same time too, this is more concerned about bringing new data in. So we just want to make sure that when new data is brought in, we're not breaking the pass. And new data is brought in and opens up a PR. So I guess you really don't care on if I open up a pull request with changes and this errors out, it could error out because some path changed in the main Tauri repo. That's not really context that's helpful for that PR itself. So maybe this makes sense as something run on a cron instead. But at least this gives us a good test. We got to check out. It's doing the generate. Documentation generated. And it's doing a copy. No errors or anything. We're doing our git config setup and then clean up. So I think that's working. Do we have enough here that it makes sense to I think what I'm going to do is I talked myself into it. Rather than doing this on a pull request, I'm going to do it on a cron. And that we can just run. I mean, if you're changing your paths, if we're moving stuff around in Docusaurus, we kind of want to know that too. I don't know. I'll leave it in as pull request, and this might be something we can discuss and switch it to cron or just remove it. But I think we've got everything here. And we got our deploy preview from Netlify, which is nice. And really the only way that we're going to be able to check this further is if we merge this in, which is sort of unfortunate. So the only way I think that we can hit that we can target our workflow is if it's on the main branch. So I think I'm going to go ahead and mark this as ready for the moment. And it should be rather innocuous. It is going to so when we merge in, and it's not going to be running on the main branch either. It's only going to be running when we hit the button or we get a payload event. So it should be pretty innocuous if we also decide to merge this in right now. But I think let's make sure we can't call it from a branch. Workflow run. We want to look at repository dispatch. You can trigger a webhook event called that. So this is basically just saying, hey, hit it, tap it with a webhook and it'll run. It doesn't say anything about it having to be in the main branch, but I'm pretty certain it needs to be. I mean, I guess we can just try it. I think I can also do, so I've got the GitHub CLI installed. We are in the Tauri docs repo, so it should have that context for us. We we can do GitHub Actions. GitHub. Watch the workflow, rerun, download, list. Just out of curiosity, is it only going to give us a list of things on the main branch? Oh no, it doesn't. It does give us the one that's on the separate branch. Trigger our workflow dispatch run. And we don't have a workflow dispatch, but we could technically trigger that. Yeah, we could trigger that. Enable, disable. I didn't know you could disable a workflow. Interesting. Rerun. Yeah, there's really nothing else that's going to help us here. Okay, so I'm pretty certain it needs to be on the main branch, but nothing's actually saying it has to be. Okay, so we need to either provide gotta have a personal access token. Or the client payload can be used as a tester to bug your workflow. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not really clear. Does it have to be in the main branch? So the other thing that we're going to try, and we're going to get getting close to end time here. Peter Evans also has a repository dispatch, which saves us a little bit of the work on actually hitting this with Webhook. So here you can see the client payload, and this is the way that we can give it the context needed to run more specific things. We need an access token while we're running it, and it doesn't actually say anything about the branch. Okay, they say it here. It's weird that the docs don't actually say it. Like, this is helpful information to know that it only runs on the main branch or on the default branch. But I don't actually see that anywhere. Why don't these docs have that information? Yeah, that feels like something valuable to have here. Okay, well, I think we've about done all the stuff we need on the pull request. If anybody is feeling like testing some stuff, we can merge this in. Anybody want to give a thumbs up that's watching? I mean, I can merge it in too, but I don't know. That always feels. I guess we don't actually have any. We don't actually require any thumbs. That might be something we want to look at. And actually, kind of a reminder to myself, there's a new option on the branches. Oh yeah, we don't have any protection rules on here. That's probably something we should look at. Let's go to the main Tauri repo. I think we've we've got to have some stuff here. We don't really use latest anymore, so that's not a big deal to look at. But the allow specified actors to bypass pull request requirements. I think this could be really handy for us because we can require approvals, but not required for admins. Because some of our repos are mostly just done by a couple of core contributors, and getting those reviews is difficult. And it's not valuable to hold that work up. But we don't want to open it up to allow people to push directly to the main branch. Just because the PR workflow is valuable, and keeping that consistent on if you're getting the reviews or not is valuable, I think. And it's safer to not push directly to the main branch. So if something goes, hey, you can't push to the main branch, that's helpful. But prior to this, the only way you could prevent them from pushing also meant that they wouldn't be able to merge in without a review, which was frustrating. But anyways, okay. So I think we're probably fine on our pull request wherever I put it. Now to do a payload event to make sure that this works, I don't know that we really have anything that needs to like, so like Tauri icon, we pulled that one out of the main repo. I think that makes sense, but we also kind of want to document it, and it may be something that we want to document on the main site. So like that kind of, we have all these plugins, we've got all this different context that we're building up into like a single source, and having the ability to trigger it from multiple places is going to be nice. I don't know if there's really going to be a good place to drop this. I think we've got I'm just going to do it on the side just so I don't accidentally, I don't think we really have anything private that's going to matter, but work. We've got a workflow test bed. That probably makes sense. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do that. Tauri. We're going to workflow test bed. Now we can drop a repository dispatch in here, and that'll give us a quick way to test this, just to make sure that part of it works and is kicking it off. And that should open up a PR. But if we put it there, we can put it behind a button, and that could be something that we can use to test. Everybody working on the docs can use it to test and spin that up quick. I don't care about the current context. What are we testing here? Don't really care about that. Most of that is not going to be something helpful anymore. Don't even have a master branch. That's sort of just a test. So I think I'm going to actually clean this out. This is not helpful anymore. This was prior to a lot of our workflow stuff, including I think Covector. And we needed a way to like test this release sequence because it got really involved quickly. A little bit off the screen here. Heck it. I mean, there's a reason we had to put in some effort to pull all of that out. Okay, so we're just going to delete all those. We're going to make a new file real quick. We're going to call it trigger update docs. We are going to copy a couple bits from here. We want to have a workflow dispatch. We're going to call it trigger update docs. We have a workflow dispatch. I don't think we're going to need any inputs per se at the moment, so we're going to take that off. We're going to remove pull request. Oh, I should really, before I do all this, I'm going to let's commit this. We're not really using this for anything for right now. It's been a long time since we actually pushed to it, so I'm going to be just pushing to the main branch. Because that's what a test bed is. Scrub all old tests. Test work. Git push. Now we should have our workflow file. So we're running it on workflow dispatch. We want to effectively do this. Build and dispatch. Sure, that's enough that we can strip out. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we've got trigger update, workflow dispatch. That'll give us a button when we merge this, or when we get into the main branch. This is an artifact we don't care about, and it doesn't need anything, and we don't need a strategy because we are just going to be running the single box on Ubuntu. Our step is going to be repository dispatch to Tauri docs. We're going to be using V1. His tagging or their tagging strategy is pretty well done, I would say. I can't ask for anything more. So they're still on V1. I'm fine with just sticking whatever the V1 is. So it's a little bit less. Well, we're not pinning it to a specific version, and we're not pinning it to a commit. So a little bit of risk there as far as potential breakages. But this is pretty much just a test bed. All we need to do is like run this trigger. So if we're just running off of things that are on the, a major, we shouldn't really theoretically run into any breakages. And when V2 comes out, if there are breakages, that'll give us the chance to make that change. So we need a token. Let us, what did I do with that page? Okay, workflow testbed. I'm gonna go ahead and drop the bot token in there quick. Let's see. Oh, okay. So we actually do have an org. So we can use this. And repository is going to be Tauri docs. And our event type here needs to match this. So when we send the event, or when we send the dispatch, this event needs to match the event that we're sending. So, do that. And I think that's it. So basically this will give us a button that we can click, and it's going to actually trigger an update docs workflow on the other one. And this will be a cheeky way to, like, once we sort of get that flow set up, we can test it a little bit. using this. And we'll need to talk about the bot, the search bot and the melee search stuff a little bit, because those might need to, we might not want to like run them on the on special workflow. Like we might want to do like, actually maybe that's a good way to do it. We can say event type test update docs. Now in here we are going to be looking for two types, update docs or test update docs. And now what we could do is, I'm not going to do it now, but when we enable a couple of these things, if we don't want to do a melee search push for it to re-index when we're testing and on PR, because right now we only have it skip on PR, but we can also have it when it gets a dispatch with a test, we can skip it too. So those would be like the two events that it runs on. So commit that, git commit, add second event, test event to skip workflows that skip workflows. I'll add a little bit extra context. We don't want to run certain steps in our workflow while testing. But the suspense is killing me, Fabian. Doesn't it make sense to split up the bot and search into a separate workflow? We did talk about that a little bit. Right now I've just got it commented out, but one thing that complicates it a little bit is the depending on what you're qualifying as the bot itself, I don't think we actually need to redeploy. So I think we could just completely strip that out. And that could be, especially if we're switching up how we're hosting and deploying that, I think that could be completely split out. Because both the bot and the website are just pointing to melee search, to the melee search endpoint. But that needs to be in this workflow, because when we get a doc update, we need to push those doc updates to melee search. And I did put a note here because I'm prone to forgetting things. So I think that's something that as we're moving things around a little bit with our bot, basically take the work that has done prior on that, copy it into a serverless setup, and that could potentially go on our Netlify site. And then we can completely strip it out here. So then all this needs to worry about is generating all the docs, sending it to melee search, and just opening up a PR. And if we're just doing a test on PR, or if we're triggering in this workflow from this button on a different repo, we don't want to update melee search, and we don't want to open up a PR. Those are the two options that we may or may not want to actually do. If we're clicking the button from a different repo as a test, we potentially want to skip the search index, but we might want to open up a PR. The search index needs to be in another workflow anyway, or at least additionally, because we index the guides too. True. That is actually very true. I completely forgot about that. Because this is just opening up a PR with the updated docs. So once we get it into here, all of this is going to be concerned about is effectively the content. Like this is the content generation step. And once we have the content generated, immediately search can then take that and index it. So yeah, I think you're actually right there. I was thinking this was doing the build process too as well, but I think I'm conflating things. So let's put a note. This doesn't really need to be run. Yeah, Docusaurus immediately search indexer. So, oh yeah, so that was the interesting bit, because we were also running Docusaurus on like a whole separate instance from our actual Tauri docs to spin up Docusaurus to build the thing to then give something to melee search to actually index on. Yeah. I mean, it worked. I'm not going to fault anybody for that. But this, I think this setup will end up making everybody's lives a little bit easier. And we're not really like losing too much as far as like effort that we put into it, I don't think. So there's always ways we can make things better. We always learn things, but just keep moving forward. Yes, we should probably keep the search index changes minimal for now. Yeah, which is probably why I've got a half of this all commented out. Because we can sort of progressively open this up once we get it set up. And then this either gets, we either do it here or we do it somewhere else. And if we do it somewhere else, we delete it. If we do it here, then we just uncommented it out. But it kind of sounds like, for the most part, what we've got here might actually be what we end up wanting to keep. Got a little bit lucky in my commenting out, I guess. So this we don't really need to run this on the content generation and PR opening. Should this be removed and run as part of the Netlify build, or run at the same time as our Netlify publish sequence. Okay. Get that. Comments. Oh. Wrong repo. Push. Okay. I think we're probably good on that then. So we've got that. Let's do Tauri docs, Tauri update. Let's get this committed. We'll get this up to the main branch. Git commit. Is this the whole doc update thing? Yes, it is. Add dispatch workflow to test doc generation sequence. Okay, so now we should have workflow test bed. Should have a button. I might need to give access to some people that care about this. But now we should have a button that we can click and it'll actually run that. Oh, that is built in. Okay. So I guess you don't actually need that on the main branch. You can trigger the workflow files from the main branch, but you can trigger it running from a different branch. So you can say, this workflow, I want to run the workflow that's on the main branch on a different branch. I think maybe that's it. So rather than like having to manually pass it a ref, you could just select a branch this way. I think that's what's happening there. But we have our button. I think I will give this a sec just to build and deploy. It's rather innocuous, so I think if somebody wants to give me a thumbs up, that would be cool. Otherwise, I might just hit the merge button when this is done. So all this is doing right now, as sort of a self-review and anybody else watching, we now have a workflow that will run on pull request, a repository dispatch, which is a webhook, or a workflow dispatch, which is the button. The button would be in this repo. The job itself is checking out the main Tauri repo and the Tauri docs repo, and we currently need both of those to generate our docs. We could potentially make this first checkout of the main Tauri repo a dynamic thing, to where when we're generating a new set of docs or updating docs, a plugin could say, hey, I want to update my docs. Since we're storing all the content and committing into this repo, we're basically, any repo can use a repository dispatch as a way to say, hey, I want you to update my content. And to generate that content, all we really need is the thing doing the generating and the place accepting it. Yeah, and yeah, that'll be good how we to figure out how to do version docs. So we'll have docs on a next branch, and there's an actual like version function, and that basically is copying and pasting the docs into a separate folder. So once the content gets here, then we can do some things before we actually go into the publish sequence. So like if we would merge in a PR that came in here, those would go basically on the next branch. And then when we say, hey, this is ready to go, we run this command locally, I guess. I mean, theoretically, we could make it a button too, but it would copy the next. It's effectively copying the content in the next folder, pasting it, and changing the folder name to whatever version it is. So we're grabbing everything. We're generating just the Tauri docs right now. So this we can tweak to be cognizant of the payload that we're getting, and that will tell us where we need to run and what commands we need to run to generate the docs. That's what we can use it for, rather than having it hard coded. And then we are opening up a PR. So we might want to like tweak this a little bit if we start doing plugin stuff, but that's something we can go with. Gracias. We're gonna go ahead and merge. So now we should have an update docs workflow. If we go to it, we've got our button. So this is one way we can trigger it. From the button, it will open up a PR, which is fine for now. But the thing that we really wanted to test is being able to trigger it from a different repo. Like when we publish a new version in the main Tauri repo, we want to trigger an update of the docs on the other one. So this workflow testbed right here, that's effectively taking place of whatever repo needs to run the update. So we're going to run this. This is going to create a new workflow run. It's going to do the repository dispatch, which we should then see reflected like this, go like this. Bad credentials. I forgot to put the token on there. No. I used the org one, didn't I? I wonder if we didn't update the org one. Yeah, or go Tauri bot. Drag that on the side for the moment. Let's look at my secrets. What if we just have the bot token on the main repo? Yes, we do. Okay, so I'm going to put it as a secret. We are going to change our workflow run real quick here so we can trigger this. Tauri bot PAT. Use repository secret instead. Okay, so I need to make sure to be consistent. This is what I'm going to name it. I'm going to do it on the side here because security. I need to put it in workflow testbed because that is the thing that needs the token to be able to trigger it on the other repo. New repository secret, Tauri bot PAT. Now let me grab that. Tauri bot. I did not write down the PAT. Bummer. Okay, I'm gonna have to log into it real quick. I think this is the last thing. Yeah, if we can get this triggered, I think this is probably a good stopping point. And we've sort of proved out the workflow at this point. Or enough of the workflow that we can kind of extend it from here. All right. It changed everything. Here we go. Okay. We need, I think we just need, I'm not quite sure what we need actually. What events do we need? Or what scopes rather? I think we just need access to the repos. Access to public repos. We don't need any admin things. Repo hook. Full control. Full control repository hooks. We might need some extra scopes. I'm just going to try to keep the scopes small though. And we are going to call this the workflow testbed access token. Okay, we've copied it. pasted it. We've got a repository secret called Tauri bot, PAT. All right, okay. So now we've pushed that. Let's try, I've got way too many windows open now. Oop. Okay. Trigger. So we ran that one. We had an issue with permissions. We hopefully have fixed the permissions because I pushed a change to use the repository secret itself. On the side, I said the repository secret because security. Oh, I want a new workflow. I want to select and I want to run. So now this is going to run and we should get a new run here. We can look at it quick while it starts. It should go pretty quick. And then hopefully we get something from here over there. Repository not found. Scope it. This is why it's kind of nice to have a way to test. I mean, we could test some of this locally, but at the end of the day, you still kind of need to test the workflow. Repo name has to be scoped to user. Yep, gotta get mine pointing on the right angle. That, now that's triggering. We are getting a run here. It's gonna generate and it's actually gonna open up a PR, which we can just close. It's not too big of a deal. But that, that's kind of our test. And now from here, we can, as long as we keep the same folder structure, we can set up some sort of script that basically we run it. Credentials. Okay, let's see. Okay. So we've got some issue with this. It's probably still the PAT because we're using the bot token. We didn't add the bot token here. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna actually make a new one. Tauri docs bot update. And we need public repo. We need, I guess that's really it. We don't really need anything else, do we? All right, so we're gonna add another token to here on the other end. So then we'll have that available here. I'm gonna save that as well. And we need to put this on Redux. And we want to call it Tauri bot, PAT, which is fine, I think. So now we have the secret. Since the secret just changed, we actually can just rerun this. So it'll work just the same as if we triggered it. So if it's going to work the same, like we triggered it here and then it came over here. Rerunning it, it's just going to work exactly the same. So it's still going to use that same context and everything. And if we got all of our permissions correct, I did keep them pretty scoped pretty tightly, so can't do too much with this token, which is safe. And that should have opened up a BR. There we go. And you can see it's actually using some of the context here, and it says that I opened it. Does anybody have any questions? I think this is a good place to stop. It'll be nice if we get some more of the local workflow stuff set up to help out. But using this, we've got a single source of truth, and everything else can just trigger it and give it any context that it needs to actually run. And I think that's going to be good, because then we don't need to try to maintain this on everything that's giving it documentation. Nice. Yeah. It would have been nice to get a little bit more of the local stuff done. But we ran into a couple issues, technical issues too, that mic. Oh, Logitech software. What can you do? Other than get a new mic, which I'll probably end up doing soon. Well, thank you everyone for stopping by. We're probably going to keep doing Tauri stuff. We'll probably bounce back and forth between like open sourcey type things like this that's operating in the context of Tauri, or using Tauri itself. We may end up doing some other things on stream as well, but I think those are going to be I want to get some channel points so we can do some interesting things on the stream. Like, you like Tauri stuff. Yeah, me too. I want to get those channel points so I can do some fun stuff with, with stream pop-ups and whatnot. And the only thing that's preventing me from getting affiliate is just doing a handful more streams. So I might have a couple weeks where I do 2 streams, and then I might do some other stuff. Like I've got a little Raspberry Pi here that I want to play around with. Where is it? Yeah, can't see it in the packaging. So I've got that, and I've got it's as I'm like reflecting my little screen, it's an e-ink display. So like that's the last image that the people that made this pushed to it. It doesn't actually require any battery to or any power to draw the image. It just stays. So it's the same thing that the same like technology I think that the like Kindle Paperwhite is using. And that plus the Pi Zero, Raspberry Pi Zero, I think makes for some interesting like very low power display kind of device kind of stuff, which I think is nifty. And it would be interesting to like tie some Tauri stuff into that too. I know we've been talking about trying to get Tauri cross-compiled on Raspberry Pi, which is a little bit of an uphill battle, but you know, it would be something that would be fun to explore. So, but anyways, next time, thanks for everybody stopping by. We got some cool things done. We'll keep doing more cool things. We're getting very close to V1, stable Tauri, likely with some RC versions leading up to that. So, excite. Thank you everybody for stopping by. Have a good weekend. Bye.